Story 1-1. Pre-K through 12 school, serving ages 3 to about 18. Someone called in a bomb threat, causing the entire school to evacuate to a nearby church. 2. This occurred before I entered high school during a wave of student suicides. A love fence was created in my grandmother's neighborhood and later displayed in a common area of the school. 3. An epidemic among middle school boys involving goosing, which is holding hands together, making a finger gun shape, and shoving it up someone's pants while they are still wearing them. 4. Frequent fights in middle school bathrooms, mainly involving boys, sometimes ending with someone being stabbed with a pencil. 5. The high school math department struggled to hire qualified teachers who were appropriate role models. 6. A high school math teacher abruptly stopped a lesson to ask a female student if she masturbated because she wore a self-love shirt. When the student questioned him, he insisted. The school fired him after about 30 witnesses confirmed the incident. He was not allowed to resign. Story 2. This was my sister's school, but it was far worse than anything that happened at my school while I was there. Boys A and B were friends. Boy A had a crush on a girl, which everyone knew, but then the girl kissed boy B and he kissed her back. So boy A punched him at school, knocking him down in front of everyone. Words were exchanged. Then everyone went home. That should have been the end of the story. But instead, boy B complained to his mother, and she became fiercely protective. The mother told boy B to get some friends and handle his business. He invited one friend, and his mother drove them because they were children. The two boys sat in the back seat with baseball bats and cell phones and found out where boy A was. Then they told their chauffeur. She took them to the fight, but when boy A saw them, he ran. So the mother ran him down, crushing him between her front bumper and a building. Then she ordered the boys out of the car to do what they had come to do. Boy A died. I know the mother was sentenced to life in prison for murder, though I did not follow the case closely, and this happened about 15 years ago. I never found out what happened to the two boys. I think they were 15 at the time. My sister knew of them but did not know them. The same for the boy who died. It is a large school, and none of the kids involved were in my sister's program. Story 3. For a senior prank, some students bought a gallon of fox urine and poured it in the air conditioning vents. They had to close the school for a week, and even months later on warm days you could faintly smell it. Story 4. We had an art teacher who painted wonderful murals in his classroom. His classroom was in the basement. When they built a new school, they made him promise not to paint murals on the walls of his new classroom. He agreed, and they gave him a new classroom. His old classroom was turned into a storage room, and the old building was for kindergarten through 6th grades. As a summer custodian, I got to see those murals. They were incredible. Years later, the art teacher retired and then passed away. They tore down that part of the elementary school and destroyed his art without any effort to preserve it or even photograph it. To me, that is the most tragic thing that ever happened at that school. The level of indifference to his art and to art in general was terrible. Story 5. I live in a relatively idyllic New York City suburb, but a senior girl was murdered my freshman year of high school, and it is generally assumed that the killer was a student. It was a really sad situation. Nobody realized she was missing until later that night when she did not come home. Technically, teachers are supposed to take attendance each period, but some were lax, so it was tough to tell if she showed up for school at. Well, some people remembered seeing her and others did not. To make things even more confusing, she played a sport, and her coach was confident she was at practice. But when it became clear the situation was serious, he admitted he could have made a mistake. It started as a missing person case and rumors swirled. Kids kept insisting they saw her in the city over the weekend or that she ran away because her father was abusing her. Kids would prank call her parents, pretending to be her, then laugh. It got so bad that we had a school-wide assembly where the police explained the gravity of the situation, and the principal announced that anyone caught harassing her family would be expelled. She was found dead months later, rolled up in a carpet at a known teen hangout, wearing the clothes she wore to school. Story 6. When I was in high school, a classmate of mine died during the spring of our junior year. It was a small all-boys high school, so we all knew each other very well. It was a really sad accident. He was at a small party with some other boys and a couple of girls from the girls' school. He had been drinking, slipped, and fell on the way to the bathroom. He hit his head, and other people there assumed he was sleeping because he was drunk. By the next morning, he was brain dead. Very sad. Story 7. The university covered up a series of sexual assaults, leaving students unable to take reasonable precautions during ongoing problems, such as a serial rapist who had not yet been caught by law enforcement, while continuing his method of operation at the entrance to an off-campus dormitory. The students living there were not alerted to the heightened danger, and some might not have been victimized if they had had the chance to make informed safety decisions. One event that did make campus news was when a custodian was fired and arrested for sexually assaulting women in on-campus dormitories. A few months before this reached the student newspaper, a custodian opened my bedroom door early one morning without knocking. I leaped out of bed, wearing a t-shirt and sweats, and shouted at him loud enough to wake the entire suite. He backed out of the room after a couple of minutes, never explaining a legitimate reason for his presence. Fortunately, he did not touch me. I never found out whether that was the same person. Story 8. When I was in 11th grade, a 10th grade girl went to a party and met an older man who offered to take her to another party to buy marijuana. Instead, he raped and murdered her. This was a small school, so everyone knew, or at least knew of, the poor girl who was murdered. It was a terrible shock. I remember feeling helpless and sad. Story 9. Had a couple of seniors start dating. They were allegedly going at it hard and often, to the point others were continually making comments about it. They seemed perfectly matched in energy, physical beauty, and attractiveness. A total power couple. Until their parents realized who they were dating. It turned out that one of them had been adopted. The other family had given him up as a high school sweetheart's accidental baby, then later got married and had a daughter. There was a reason they were a perfect match. They were genetically siblings. He had been held back a year, so they ended up being classmates. The rumor mill went crazy after that. I felt bad for them both. How do you mentally overcome that? Story 10. I went to a rural academy in Kansas in the early 2000s that briefly made national news for its harsh disciplinary practices. There were some arrests, and it caused a big fuss at the time. Ultimately, everyone at the school was cleared of all charges. The school sued the sheriff, Child Protective Services, and others investigating them, and years after I graduated, won a big settlement and a permanent injunction to stop interference with the school. Those punishments were no joke. The most infamous was nicknamed School Appreciation Day. For misbehavior, students had to put on boots and long pants, go to the adjacent dairy next to the school, and wade thigh-deep into a shallow manure pit before the school officials stirred it with a shovel. 10 minutes in there made most rambunctious teens straighten right up. Story 11. I went to a brand new elementary school built in the late 1980s, around 1987. It was a product of the era, one story, sprawling, with many bends and curves, featuring neat, rounded hallways and round windows throughout the building. The interior had a unique stage setup between the gymnasium and cafeteria, allowing shows to be held on either side. The library was large and inviting, with a designated area for group readings, a small nook with built-in carpeted benches surrounding a mini-stage. However, problems arose quickly. There were many leaking window seals, a leaky roof, and the flooring was very slippery when wet. If the floor was mopped, nobody could walk on it until it was completely dry. By my 5th grade year, it was discovered that design flaws rendered the building unsafe. When wind speeds reached 30 miles per hour, the school had to close, and everyone had to evacuate. The school system sued the architect who designed the building and the construction company responsible for building it, alleging they knew of the weak points that made the building unsafe. Millions of dollars were spent reconstructing parts of the school to ensure safety. I will never forget the teachers losing their composure one afternoon when the winds were very strong, and we could hear them whistling through the round windows. Those windows were later removed and bricked up. Story 12. Project Center for Educational Progress. Back in 2007, 2 teenagers attending our high school system stabbed an adult acquaintance of theirs to death, burned his corpse with a blowtorch, beheaded him, and tossed his severed head into a river. The brutality of it all garnered national attention. Story 13. A physical education teacher from an elementary school was found with child pornography on the school computer. He worked in the school district for 30 years before he was caught. Story 14. I went to a high school that was quite far north. North enough for many lakes and brutally cold winters. We used to throw house parties at different people's lakefront cabins. One party was held in mid-spring, just as the ice was melting. A few guys I knew decided to take a quick trip around the lake in a canoe at around 2 a.m. They did not return, and no one noticed until the next morning. They had tipped over the canoe. 2 guys drowned before they could even get back in the boat. The other 2 got back in the canoe but had no oars and died of hypothermia, either looking for their friends who were still in the water or trying to paddle their way back. They were found dead in the canoe, which had floated to shore. All of them were good kids, only a few years older than me. Their deaths deeply affected the school and made us all grow up quickly. After that, our parties were much more subdued, and we stopped our friends from doing dangerous things instead of encouraging them. Story 15. One time during a midterm, I felt a little stomach rumble but figured I could power through. Big mistake. I let out what I thought was a silent fart, but it turned out to be a full betrayal. I sat there in denial for about 10 minutes before the smell hit the row behind me. I had to pretend I spilled coffee on myself and waddle out mid-exam. I never went back to that class again. Story 16. Depends on who you ask. The teachers say it is a diploma mill for India and China. The students say it is the murders. The administration says people talking about any of this. The staff beyond teachers and administration say it is the murders. Story 17. Every year I was in high school, someone died. Freshman year. A kid a few years older than me was racing down the main street by our school with his cousin. The cousin lost control of the car and ended up in a tree. The kid that went to my school did not make it. Sophomore year. A student from one of my classes the year before committed suicide. His parents were getting divorced and he was going through a really bad depression. But from the outside, no one would have known he was struggling to that degree. It was a shock to the entire school. Junior year, one of my close friends committed suicide. Technically, it was not at my school. It was at the school his parents had forced him to transfer to because they did not want him to be with his girlfriend. But it affected everyone because he had been going to school with us for the last 5 years. Senior year, a freshman student was killed by 2 friends of his. They had a fight, rumored to have been over marijuana or a girl, and he was stabbed to death and left for dead in his backyard. Absolutely awful. They were supposed to be in jail for about 30 years, but one of them was released 2 years ago while the other is still in jail. Story 18. The teacher was impaled in the eye with a pencil that someone threw. He was sent to the hospital and never returned to teaching. The police came to take witness statements. Story 19. High school boy dropped dead in assembly. Later, it was revealed that he was a top athlete, and his parents even sent him for personal training. His father pushed him too hard when he had a cold or flu, which weakened his heart, causing it to fail. Rest when you are ill, no matter your age or fitness level. Illness weakens your body significantly. Story 20. I went to school near the state hospital where they sent all the mentally ill criminals. Breakouts were rare, but they did happen, and when they did, our buildings would go into lockdown until the school was declared safe. Usually, when the people escaped, they wanted to get out of town as soon as possible, so it was no big deal. But one time, they found an escapee who had killed himself in the park I had to walk through every day to get to school or home. That park was lovely in the daytime, but I would work until 2 a.m. a lot, and I would run through the park because it scared me so much. The worst thing that ever happened in my middle school was that a teacher was found assaulting a student on one of the lunchroom tables during the school day. Story 21. Small private Christian school. A group of police officers showed up to investigate students for unclear reasons, possibly related to a story or letter I wrote. I vanished for unknown reasons. I was not allowed to interfere with the police investigation, which concerned only a horror story I wrote. This story prompted the principal to call the police. Years later, I spoke with some classmates at a mini reunion, and no one was glad I was expelled except possibly the principal and a friend's mother who ensured my expulsion. For years, a rumor followed me that I was going to commit a school shooting. This was not true. I wrote a horror story and people overreacted. Public school. A freak heart attack occurred in a 17-year-old student, likely related to steroid use. The student was a member of the football team. Story 22. I don't know if it's still common, but pregnant teenagers used to sometimes go live with their aunt for a year to hide the fact that they were pregnant. They would have the child, someone would adopt the baby, and they would go home. Their shame of getting pregnant would be short-lived, and they could pretend it never happened. Nobody at home would ever find out. A girl in my class was going through that ordeal. She was nice but very private. I didn't know much about her. You could tell she was kind, but she was always trying to stay hidden. I think she was just trying to get this part of her life behind her. She never wanted to make lasting connections here. The boyfriend back home found out what her parents were making her do. He ended up murdering her parents. She had the baby, gave it up for adoption, and then couldn't escape our small town or her shame because there was no home to return to. She stopped going to school, grieved, and tried to stay hidden. The worst part was how deeply cruel people were about it. Well, they clearly weren't very good parents. I bet she's really regretting her choices now. The sweet old church lady gossip ring was the worst. Comments that make you truly question if you know someone because suddenly you feel they are sociopaths. I moved away years later and hadn't spoken to her since. I've always worried about her. Story 23. In the last 2 months at my elementary school, all the intermediate students in grades 7 and 8 would not go outside for recess and instead sneak onto the gymnasium stage. It was like a war zone there, not only because we were on the stage without permission, but also because we were there with the lights off in complete darkness. We held full boxing matches. A 7th grade boy even hit an 8th grade girl. Another student was slammed onto his back and cried in pain for about 15 minutes. Of course, the teachers found out and our graduation trip was canceled. Story 24. Your kids are in danger. Special Victims Unit detective exposes Buffalo school system. Story 25. A teacher's child was helping with the summer carnival floats. While transporting one of the floats, there was no room in the truck for her, so she rode in the open back bed. She somehow fell while the vehicle was moving and died. This happened when I was too young to know her or the story, but I remember rumors about that teacher's daughter dying. I researched it recently and found it to be true. She was only 12 at the time. Another student committed suicide in high school a few grades above me, but I did not know him. A younger student had 2 severe falls from a tree and a trampoline, injuring her leg at the knee. She also had a tumor at the base of her spine. When not using crutches or a wheelchair, she walked unevenly, with her leg jutting out as she moved. Later, she had that leg amputated late in her freshman year. She became very depressed and started using drugs afterward. She was a very sweet girl, and I hope her life improved. Story 26. One of my professors used his university credit card to purchase illegal material and have it sent to the department. I was very good friends with the department manager, as I was her work-study student for a year. Since the program was also my major, I spent a lot of time in the program's building. This means that not only was he committing heinous acts and participating in the vilest form of criminal behavior, but he was forcing us to be part of it by having us handle and distribute his mail. He was caught as part of a sting operation but never received jail time. He is now living in community housing for his religious order. This was a while ago, and I still feel a deep sense of rage for everyone affected. Story 27. When a teaching assistant was arrested for secretly videotaping boys showering after gym class, it shocked everyone. He was popular with the students, especially the more athletic ones. No one suspected him until someone found the hidden camera in his bag. Story 28. A 7th grade girl became pregnant and threw the baby in a dumpster. Not even her parents knew until someone found the baby. The baby survived. Story 29. A Jewish student came to his dorm room to find that someone had painted a swastika and an offensive phrase on the door. This sparked a movement on campus about anti-Semitism. There were student meetings and panels addressing the issue. Some students even organized a march and protest. Later, the student confessed to a friend that he had painted the swastika on his own door. The friend spoke up, but the incident was dismissed, and the student was expelled. He apologized, saying he was overwhelmed by anti-Semitism and felt the need to bring attention to his struggle. Story 30. Every year for the past 30 years, there has been a candy toss tradition in my school, where final-year high school students disguise themselves and throw candies in all classrooms, including primary school, middle school, and high school, to have fun one last time before studying for the baccalaureate, the most important degree at the end of high school. When a new head of the school arrived, he decided to cancel the tradition. In response, some students retaliated by sneaking into the school at night and killing all the chickens in the school chicken coop using a shovel. They also physically threatened an education advisor. Story 31. I was at university when a professor published a terrible book about education in America and became a celebrity. In the meantime, he exploited his graduate students for free labor, such as running personal errands, and for sex. Because it was the 1980s and the students were men, not women, no one cared. He even hit on my boyfriend, who was both his student and an undergraduate. Disgraceful. Story 32. A group of future farmers of America animals were killed and mutilated. One pig had a steering wheel-sized chunk of flesh removed. Story 33. A student jumped off the roof of one of the buildings at my university. Apparently, he couldn't handle the pressure of his studies. However, I believe there was more going on than we know. Story 34. One of the faculty members sexually abused girls in the computer room. He kept videos of several girls on school computers. His arrest was chaotic and everyone saw it. In 2006, internet access was still expensive in my country, so many kids used school computers during breaks to surf online, using platforms like Fotolog and early Facebook. What was terrible is that several other kids were involved in the videos as well, so the charges against him were even more severe. I hope he is still serving time in prison. Story 35. Bomb threat on Monday and school shooter threat on Tuesday, a week before semester exams in December 2023. That school year also had a student accidentally bringing a weapon to school in the first couple of weeks, and a man who shot his wife fleeing police in a nearby town, causing our school to go into a modified lockdown where students could only leave the classroom to switch classes. Story 36. When I was in the 9th grade, the 8th grade girls hated the teacher they had for English. One girl set herself up as a teacher's pet and would get water from the hallway water fountain, but the water was actually from the toilets. The teacher got sick and the student was expelled. The same year, a football player tackled a guy so hard that it paralyzed him. Story 37. There was a teacher who had inappropriate pictures of children. It was the early 2000s. He had them on a computer in his classroom. Another teacher discovered them. Story 38. My high school years were from grades 8 to 12. When I was in 10th grade, an 8th grader died during childbirth. She had hidden the pregnancy from everyone, including her parents. Her parents were alerted by the crying of the baby, and they found their daughter had bled out on the bed next to the baby. Yes, it was very upsetting. Story 39. I study at Far Eastern University, a university here in the Philippines. This week, our country is experiencing an extreme typhoon. Most of our roads are flooded above the knee and not passable. Some people have even died in their provinces. Students' graduation rites were scheduled from yesterday until July 25th. Students were begging our university not to proceed with the graduation as some of them were stranded in their provinces and did not have transportation to go to the venue. However, Far Eastern University proceeded. Some students had no choice but to not attend and sell their tickets. I even saw one student who posted a video on our Facebook page, showing her and her mom riding a rescue boat just to attend. Story 40. Not the worst, but I remember in 6th grade someone shoved the soap dispenser into the toilet along with the towel roll. Me, being the silly kid I was, urinated on it. They closed down the boys' bathroom, but the day it reopened, I saw they shoved the outside rim that was supposed to go around the soap container down the toilet. When I told the principal, she was very disappointed. My friends and I had a giggle. Story 41. A man entered carrying a hatchet in each hand and began swinging at people. Not a common weapon like a knife or a gun, but 2 hatchets. Story 42. High school. The school I attended is a Catholic high school for grades 7 through 12, with about 500 students at the start of the school year. It is known for being academically challenging and sending 95% of graduates to college. However, there were multiple scandals during my time there, ranging from a bomb threat to two sex scandals, also known among students as the cupcake scandals. To be honest, I did not enjoy attending. Before discussing the cupcake scandals, I will describe other incidents. The bomb threat. This occurred in my freshman year, 2007 to 2008, on the last day of school before Easter break, which was a Thursday. The principal and assistant principal believed it was a bomb threat on paper. I rode the bus, so we were stranded on campus for an hour until our parents could pick us up. School was canceled that day. The bathroom drawing scandal, 2008 to 2009 school year. Sophomore year this happened in 2009, though I do not recall the exact month. One Wednesday after Mass, which my school held on Wednesday mornings, all the male students had to stay after while the girls returned to class. The school administrators gave us a lecture for vandalizing the boys' bathroom, which had been renovated the previous summer. Later that day, I counted 9 inappropriate drawings in the restroom, including one that said, "Mrs. Chemistry Teacher Choke on Dick." The scandals that made local news were the sex scandals. Sex Scandal 1. This took place in August 2008, during the first week of the 2008 to 2009 school year. A geometry teacher, whom I will call Mr. Sampson, showed up only on the first day of school, a Monday. He was responsible for teaching the entire grade geometry. He did not appear on campus on Tuesday or Wednesday, which was unusual. Rumors began circulating on Wednesday that he had been arrested, but I initially dismissed them. On Friday, during math class, a school administrator announced that Mr. Sampson had been arrested and would no longer work for the school district. News of this appeared on local media that Friday night. He had engaged in a relationship with a senior student. As a consequence, we had teachers leaving approximately every 6 weeks, resulting in substitute geometry teachers throughout the year. Sex Scandal 2. This occurred during the 2009 to 2010 school year, my junior year. The teacher involved was a law teacher, physical education teacher, and assistant football coach, whom I will call Mr. Cresswell. I saw him but never spoke with him. At the time, he was in his late 20s and considered attractive by many female students. It was known among students that he had a relationship with a softball player. During the school year, he was drugging and sexually assaulting several students on the high school softball team at his house. Mr. Cresswell had previously left a nearby public school district for similar misconduct the prior year. Story 43. Just a few months before graduation, a girl in my senior class overdosed. It was later revealed to be a suicide after she was assaulted. I didn't know her, but I felt empty for weeks afterward. We made a memorial board and gave her diploma to her parents on graduation day. Also, a well-loved science teacher was recently caught talking to multiple students and taken to jail for child pornography found on the computer. My town is disappointing. Story 44. There are many incidents, but I will focus on those where I was not the sole victim or that were the most immoral and tragic. Grade school. My district was underfunded. Teachers were constantly being let go during a recession in a very rural area. This situation lasted a long time. In 2006, one teacher died, and in 2011, a teacher who taught students a few grades above me passed away from cancer. The school had a bullying problem. The same bullies I had in preschool, mostly a significant number of male students, were unkind. One student accidentally died by self-inflicted gunshot. My second principal had a serious chronic medical condition. The school did not handle my autism and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder well, especially when it resulted in bullying. The special education department was understaffed. 2 7-year-olds viewed inappropriate content in the computer lab and attempted child-on-child sexual abuse on me shortly after. 2 years later, that group of students vandalized the restrooms. It was ultimately a very distressing experience. Things became so bad that I transferred to a charter school. 9th grade. The bullying problems continued, and the school could not manage them. A friend and I became victims of actual crimes and ended up leaving. The school also had policies that led to multiple successful lawsuits. 11th grade. The official after-school program I attended violated the Americans with Disabilities Act as policy. Things deteriorated for me, causing a difficult situation. My parents wanted to sue. My father works for the district and is a department chair. It became a spectacle in all the worst ways. 12th grade. COVID-19 pandemic. First university. At a club event, a member of my friend group who was a club president was punched in the face. Things escalated and I almost had to testify. Second university. This college, slightly before my time, suppressed a friend's very serious Title IX complaint. Compared to my first university, conditions were significantly worse until the end of last semester. The lesson from these experiences is to take victims seriously, especially when allegations of criminal acts are involved. Story 45. Some high school students were fighting as usual. However, one time one of them had a knife and there was a school lockdown and some loss of life. Story 46. One time in elementary school, multiple police cars showed up. They said to stay in the classroom unless it was an emergency. I had to go to the bathroom, but on the way, a teacher said, "Nothing to see here," and said, "Keep going." I never figured out what happened. Story 47. At school, when I was 13, I fell down a flight of stairs so hard that I was in the hospital for a month. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.